Hello, adventurers. My name is Dan from Dungeons by Dan, and this is the Dice20 Collective, where a group of my adventuring friends get together and we discuss things all D&D. Today, we're going to talk about the very first thing, Session Zero. What do you do? How do you do it? What are some tips? And we have a spirited discussion. We do talk about some heavy topics, which are typical of a Session Zero, but I think we're going to come out the other side and have some great tips for you guys to learn, and I know I certainly learned some things myself. With me today is Dan, Mike, and John. I'll introduce them in just a second. I'll also give a link so you can skip ahead if you'd rather skip introductions. And without further ado, let's get adventuring. On the top left of my screen here, I have Dan. And Dan, go ahead, give me a quick description about yourself and how long you've been playing and all that, and we'll go to our next guest.
My name's Dan. I've probably been playing for about 5 or 6 years, mostly with the same group, but with COVID and stuff, maybe 5 months ago, I've been getting more into the online stuff with Roll20, and then that's how I met Dan and the rest of these guys. And then only been DMing for maybe about 5 months or so kind of newer to that part of it.
Great. And on the top right here, we have Mike. How long you been DMing for?
Off and on for about 30 years, give or take a year, year or two. I think I started back about, 4th or 5th grade. Me and my friends had just finished up The Hobbit, and I saw that old school, the red box basic set at a local bookstore and brought it home. It only got you up to level 3. And I think that's how we all started, like drawing out the dungeons on graph paper all the way back in the pure pen and paper era.
Nice.
But, when I first saw 2nd edition, the advanced Dungeons and Dragons, that was mind blowing. It was so advanced. And here we are in 5e.
And John Vespa, what's your story?
So I first started playing as a player in, I think, 88, and that was kind of right post after the original box that Mike's talking about that we started playing with, and then DMing somewhere after that, a couple of years after that. I think we lost our DM, and so I DM'd here and there, but 2E was really when I played the most, I think, until most recently with 5E.
So it sounds like we have easily over 50 years of experience between the four of us. So I think we should be qualified to discuss a Session Zero, don't you think?
Speak for yourselves.
All right, so but right as we get into it here, hit the subscribe button. I hope we're going to be doing this maybe twice a month. So subscribe and you'll be notified when we do more of these. So Session Zero, important, not important, useful? What's your guys' thoughts on how important should a Session Zero be?
I'll tell you what, I think that it depends on how well you know the players, right? So I've joined a couple new games on Roll20 where I haven't known any of the people, and I've just submitted an application type of thing. And a lot of times then you have a Session Zero for that, even though there's a posting that kind of spells all these things out, but you still want to get together and kind of feel out the people that you've selected, I think, is what the DM's intention is there. But I think if you're going into a game and, we all know each other, then, I think we all know what to expect on some levels, at least.
I'd say even then, once you know each other, the whole Session Zero is about setting expectations, both DM and player. And even if you're familiar with each other, if you've run 3 or 4 campaigns that all seem to have a similar theme, you all tend to play a similar setting, similar type of characters, and someone wants to try something different, maybe that's a good time to talk about it before you start throwing curveballs.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like I was saying to Dan earlier, I feel like with my in-person group, we've all that's the only group most of us have ever played with. So we almost have never done a Session Zero, and I feel like it's worked out because we know each other so well. But I feel like there could have been ways that we could have potentially done other things a little bit better if we had the Session Zero. Like the backstories might have been a little more cohesive or that type of stuff. But yeah, I think if you know the people, that can definitely play into it more.
Yeah, I think it's easy to be familiar. I think if you're unfamiliar, a Session Zero is probably even more important, right? Like you need to set the ground rules of what exactly is happening and to kind of get the feel of the players and to make sure that they're not going to break your game. But even for players that you've known for a while, like I've been playing with some of you guys for quite some time, and if my world is new and different and I like to homebrew stuff, then you need to be able to have a character that fits into my story. Even so, maybe I don't have to I know who you are and I know what you're about, but you have to have a character that fits my story. So I still think a Session Zero is integral for people who you've known forever.
Yeah, I think there's some value there, especially to say, what does the player kind of want to get out of the session, the campaign, and you kind of lay out what you want to provide per session, per campaign is going to be, more combat heavy, that type of stuff. So you kind of spell those things out a little bit. When you've ran a Roll20 campaign and you've just asked for applications, let's say, you don't know the people, do you do a Session Zero in those instances?
Yeah, so when I couldn't find a group, I actually had a pretty intense Session Zero. I mean, to weed out some of the garbage players, maybe they're not garbage, but they just weren't my style. Apparently, I'm a little more serious than I knew that I was at the time. But, I was playing with players who said things like, oh, I'm going to go and punch the king in the dick. And it's like, well, there's one way to get people out of that, and that's having a nice hardcore Session Zero that says, throw at me a good character, because people who punch kings in the dicks aren't going to throw good characters at you. So
that's just your opinion, though, man.
That's fair. Someone else might really want that type of game, and maybe a little more slapstick type of thing, So I think it is. I think on that level, it is important to make sure that the players mesh up with what the DM wants, right? Whether it's punching kings and dicks or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Then it goes it's because it can also be kind of a negotiation where it helps both sides. If you are the type of player that wants to punch kings in the dick, you're not going to have fun at my table. I will have less fun by having you at my table.
Right.
We would just both be better off at different tables.
No one's happy.
Have you ever come into an instance where someone makes it past your original Session Zero and then turns out you really don't mesh with them as a player anyway, and maybe you cut cord later on? Because I've experienced that as a player with other players in my group, and then the DM is then 6 sessions in been look, this isn't working out for us. We think we should go the separate way. Has that happened to anybody else?
It's me, not you.
Yeah. That's not happening to me, but I think that just goes to show the importance of the Session Zero, trying to filter those out off the bat if possible.
It doesn't, because that person already made it through the Session Zero, right? So the Session Zero didn't really weed this person out, right?
It's that much right, yeah.
So
no, it's happened to me, and
I check in a lot, actually. I do a lot of check-ins, every couple months I'll do a check-in, or have someone that I can talk to throughout it. But I definitely, my campaigns tend to be long, but I do a yearly check-in. Hey, how's it going? We signed up for this.
To make sure they're enjoying themselves type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Is this what you want? I think it's funny because I did some reading online before we decided to have this conversation, and it was ask what type of game you want to play. Well, it's fuck off. I don't do that type of game. You know what I mean? This is how I DM, and I can try and do different things. But if you want, this hardcore romance, stealth thing, I'm not really sure how to do that exactly, So I always find those kind of questions what kind of game do you want? It's a weird question because, shouldn't you just be happy that either I created a homebrew campaign for you, or I'm running a module or something, and you're yeah, dope, I'm in.
Yeah, well, I think some people look at that and say I want political intrigue in my campaign, or and some people don't, or that type of thing. So I kind of look at it like that, as as far as what this is what I want in my game, or combat heavy, right? I want one combat per session would be ideal, right? But I want a good mixture of all these things. And in my personal opinion, I want to touch on everything, That's
yeah.
Player.
Going to Dan's earlier point about the investments, about the occasional person, that you don't mesh with, kind of sneaking through your Session Zero. Questions like that: what do you want, or what do you expect out of a campaign? Help in that. At least in my experience, people are far more volunteering of information when you ask open-ended questions. I mean, if you just ask them, do you prefer combat heavy or not? Do you prefer political intrigue or not? Versus just kind of getting them to, give their unfiltered thoughts about what they're expecting, the kind of campaigns they enjoy. I think you get much more insight into their play style.
I think that's a good point. So like I said, I've only been DMing the one module I'm doing right now, but I know looking back on my email, so the session 0 before the session 0 and the session 0, I feel like it was more me sharing what my thoughts were, and I in retrospect I kind of wish I had thrown it out to the group a little bit to get their thoughts, what they were looking for. And then to your point, Dan, just because you want that doesn't mean I'm capable of it, but at least if I am, that's good to know. So kind of I wish I had asked those questions.
I think that's a good point. Sometimes your session 0 is sort of this is what I can do, and here are some of your options. But you sort of set. I think as the DM, you got to set your limitations, right? And so sometimes it's not as much gathering information from the players at first as much as it's this is what we're doing. Are you good?
Yeah.
I think the campaigns I've been fortunate. The campaigns I've joined over Roll20 where I didn't know people or whatnot have all been, relatively really well run by the DM, and the players have been pretty good. And I made it through the whole Horde of Dragon Queen and Tyranny of Dragons. So we went from 1 to 15, and pretty. We had to boot one guy out who started going crazy halfway through, just running around the map doing things. So you can't predict that.
Jenkins.
He's running from door to door in one of the things, and the DM finally was all right, can't do this, out of here, But so I think a lot of times most of the people in my experience that I've seen on Roll20 do a pretty good job of spelling it out. What they're posting of what they expect, and then you have to fill out your whole character thing that goes along with it. It's a lot of work to do that for the DM and for the player. And so I think,
and then maybe you're not selected. It's exausing.
And then you're not selected sometimes. Sure, absolutely. And you're like, man, I really thought I had a good idea or something. So then you try to, you can put that in the trash or reuse it next time something comes along as well. But I think when you go through all that then the session 0 is okay, we've pretty honed in pretty well on what I feel confident in these guys that are committed and that type of thing. But ultimately, you just never know. People can just flake out at any moment. So.
Yeah, I've definitely had some situations where, I had, like I said, a rigorous session 0, and then after a while, it's gosh, this guy's kind of a prick. He's not really working out, and so I had to take him aside, of course, over online and phone and stuff, and be like, "What's your problem? Are you having fun?" And he's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "You don't seem like you're having fun. You're." Don't be nice. You're not having fun. He's like, no, I'm having a great time. I'm like, you don't even know the story. You're not taking notes, man. You have no clue. But so that's why I think sometimes too, the check-in, even with players, is important. Old friend players, that is.
Yeah.
And having that person you can talk to, I think, is actually critical. There's certain subjects I go to certain people so that nobody gets the whole story from my campaigns. But so just how is the pacing of this or that? But I think that kind of goes. I don't think a session 0 stops, in my opinion. It's kind of like a continuation throughout the campaign that you're playing. But I do think. At least the session 0 sets the tone of what you want.
That's fucking interesting, man.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that I'd say it's more like session 0 always continues. That's just good DM practice. They just periodically check on your players. But that's you tomato.
Right.
Yeah, one thing that I really don't like that I've encountered with some players is metagaming. And to the point where people are calling out, just things that are, I don't know, I don't think should be relevant, in character knowledge things, right? And I think that's a session 0 thing, right? Do you care if people are just way into metagaming or do you not? And where's that at? Because to me as a player, I try to keep my character, right? What seems reasonable for that character to know, that's how I want to play it like that, whether I know these other things or not. I don't want to let that affect what I do. But not everybody's like that. So that's always something
that's important.
That's something I look for, like in the session zero, just to see if we like talk about it, or I maybe I bring it up myself if it isn't discussed, just to kind of feel everyone out.
Well, especially for fellas like you who have been playing for 30 plus years, like a lot, if not all there, everything there is to know. So there's you've read all the books, the monsters, what their abilities are. So like role playing as if your character would, I think that's really important because it's a huge advantage if you don't do that.
I think you also have to, and you would have this at that time in the session zero discussion. You need to define what metagaming is, because to me, there's a spectrum. Because to a degree, any kind of table talking that isn't in character is arguably metagaming. But I think you can grind sessions and campaigns to a halt if you don't allow some degree of out of character discussion and strategizing. Every so often I will kind of egg my players to be like, so is this in character, is this out of character? Or ask them to do something in character just to see how they handle it. But if you're just really original in that always, you can turn a session into an hours long endeavor. So I think, like, to what degree do you allow that kind of strategizing? Can they have a couple seconds in a combat to be like, hey, you should, we're all bunched up, don't cast an AoE spell, versus like they have, no one can talk to each other unless it's in character. Do you put time limits on how long they're allowed to, discuss and strategize? Because on the other end of the scale, I start getting tired and annoyed when people are taking 5 minutes to absolutely optimize every single character's actions.
Yeah, analysis paralysis is what it's called. Yeah. It's exhausting.
Yeah,
I don't like when we're in combat and someone's trying to table talk. Like, that should not be part of your turn. That does not. Agree. That's my opinion. That does not exist. You should not be able to do that, and you won't ever see me do that. Like, I'm just going to play my character what I think is right, and that's the end of it. But certainly some people feel differently about that, which I understand.
So the one of the things that I like on Discord is we have a Whispers channel.
Yeah.
And I love taking people to the Whispers channel because that creates some sort of, I don't know if it's animosity among the other players, like, oh God, what's happening now? But in person, I love also passing notes.
Yeah, in person passing notes is awesome.
Love passing notes.
I pass notes just to create tension. I'll pass like a blank note, or just pass them a note saying "look very concerned," and then it's just and then have everybody else just freak out, and them just like, and then especially if your players are enjoy quasi trolling their fellow PCs. Like, I've had players that will like note really pantomime, really ham up the like, or like. And then crumple it up and throw the note away so no one else can see it.
Are you metagaming?
I think as a DM, you're always metagaming. But
I was just going to say, can the DM actually metagame?
Interesting. I played in one campaign and there's a dungeon. And so after so long in the dungeon, you started to have like these insanity level effects. And it was kind of a random roll. And then the DM would pass you a note and be like, hey, now you just so you know, you act like this, or this is what you start thinking in the back of your mind or whatever. And then you'd look at that and be like, oh God, now I got to start like acting this out, or like this is now part of my character. And he didn't tell us that until afterwards, what was the overarching kind of thing that was happening. But passing the notes I thought was crucial because we were all being very crazy at some point and nobody knew why or what the other person's motivation was. And so then it was very much like, what is going on with everybody?
Honestly, that's really fun. Yeah, I think the notes is great. And like Michael, you said, you can be a blank one and it can make everybody freak out.
Yeah. I've had that work where I'm like, you're charmed, and they're like, okay, and they don't do anything charmed. I'm like, well, that was the worst charm ever. Like, I didn't want to ruin the group. You're like stuck between a rock and a hard place on that,
I feel like this is one of the things I do like about 5e. The inspiration system gives you a way to reward players
that's true.
That buy into that. And I've done this DM. I've seen other DMs do that where someone really really buys into the charm or the being dominated and just really makes a problem for the other players. And even especially if they do it creatively, where they're not, I'm just going to immediately turn and start attacking everybody else. But like, okay, well, I will try to tackle and restrain the wizard, like as a fighter. And then they're like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you can give them inspiration. Be like, I thank you for playing this well, and take inspiration.
That's a good point. I don't use inspiration that much or at all,
if at all, right?
I find it hard to keep track of. When I have inspiration, I always inevitably forget I have it, and then I look back at the end of the session. I'm like, on my sheet, I see there's a box that says inspiration. I have it checked. It's a big flag up there, right, on the Roll20 sheet. And I'm like, God, that roll that I passed or failed, I wish I would have thought of this and used inspiration. So that's like,
would have been cooler if you did, man.
I wish that was the player's job to give inspiration, honestly, because there's like 1,000 things for the DM to do, and it's like, I'm just happy you're role playing really well, and it's like, yeah, awesome, like, and I'm just jiving, and I'm not like putting up, point for you,
right.
Like.
Well, you introduced me to the idea of nominating other players, and I really like that, and I thought that was good.
And when's the last time we did that?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to even remember, even when it's a good idea.
Yeah, I've had people nominate other people as well. In fact, Mike has nominated, I think, Dan in our game previously. So,
right.
Been nominated by someone else as well. So yeah, I do like that. I think that's good when the players do that as well, because I think that you get you get some respect from your fellow players in that manner.
Yeah, so I sent out a couple articles discussing from various websites and blogs about session zeros, and some of them have like elaborate questionnaires and stuff. And I have one on my website that I developed, which I thought was more specific. But I got to be honest, the most I've gotten out of a session zero has been my one-page summary, just saying the basics of what this is. But have you guys had any questionnaires really, or like something like that, and found it useful? Because honestly, I've been through an elaborate process, and I've seen people just be like, yeah, so can I get to my character now? Like, I don't really care about the rest of it, but like, what about this idea for a character? It's like, yeah, okay, but that's fine. We'll go there then.
So I haven't seen something like that. So what would be something like an example question that might be on,
so one of them might be metagaming, and one of them might be like, do you want to do gritty realism? Or one of them might be, do you want this style? Or like literally, like if you're doing a homebrew, like, do you want it steampunk, or do you want it high fantasy, low fantasy? There's all sorts of questions. Like, how often do you want to meet? I mean, it kind of runs the gamut of character creation to like, should I have 3 backup characters just in case you're going to run one of those campaigns? Or how detailed should my backstory be? I think some of those are kind of sometimes the most important, at least for like people who've played together, but to like discuss. But I find players really want to get right to their character, and maybe that's not fair to the DM exactly, but.
See, I actually find when I joined your campaign, Dan, I really enjoyed having your little write-up of like your world and how the various cultures interact in the gods, because like then I was able to have a much better understanding of that stuff going into my character building process. So I don't know, I actually really liked having that other stuff, because then it's like I felt like I was
good feedback, Dan.
yeah, I felt like it was like it wasn't just copying and pasting a character into like a random world. It was like, like you make it like he was actually there, even though I joined the campaign later. So I really liked having that info.
And I think that's critical when you have like a homebrew campaign, like that campaign specifically, right? Where it's not out of the books, it's not Forgotten Realms, it's not Dragon, it's not something we're all familiar with or have some familiarity with. This is like a whole brand new thing, So I think that's definitely important then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend back in Illinois that I still do online campaigns with sometimes, and I love the guy, but he's a grognard. Like, he was really cut his teeth on 2E and had trouble adjusting to the more high fantasy elements of 5E. And I mean, he pretty much just like doesn't allow races that were not 2E main book races. Like all the like hardcore humanoids, like elf, dwarf, halfling, gnome, half elf. And I mean, you almost have to like ask his permission to play half-orc, even though that's still quasi-human, because it wasn't a 2E original standard race, like Drow completely out, no tieflings, no dragonborn. So if you just show up to his table with your tiefling paladin, like he's just not going to allow that. And again, Session Zero kind of obviates that miscommunication.
So you should go to him next time and be like, "So we're gonna play 6E now." What?
I've got a bugbear assassin.
It changes so hard.
Right.
Well, I had that in my. See, this is the thing. I had, like you said, for my campaign, I had a whole write up, and then I had two rules. Like, these are the races in all the groups, and don't be evil. And for my campaign, I mean, this is very personal to me. Some races were chosen that weren't on the list, and then everyone became evil. Again, so as long as everyone was cool with it and you can weave it in, like, that's fine, But I could see where someone was like, "No, fuckers, I told you not to have evil people. Like, re-roll characters or something." I don't know. Like, that could be bad. Like, everyone went against the DM's wishes at that point. Like, how do you run an evil campaign? I mean, I know I Googled that for like a week straight.
It was cool. It was great. Everything was fine.
Like, to me, the evil campaign is like the ultimate example of, like, even of a group of people that have played together for multiple campaigns and know each other very well. Running the evil campaign has to have a Session Zero. Like, you have to, like, get everybody together and be like, are we cool doing this? Is this what we want to do? Even having said we're going to be evil, what guidelines do we want to set? Because if you've played 4 heroic campaigns together, then suddenly everyone just shows up evil, and the DM's not prepared for it, then things are going to go it's going to get very antagonistic.
It does. I think the thing to me is there's variations of evil that can work, but if you're the chaotic evil, brain-eating zombie murder hobo evil, like, you don't work in any campaign. That just does not work if you are really truly the villain. It's very different to be a villainous person who's, trying to conquer something or, wants power in some way. You can work with that at least. But if you're like the chaotic evil one, that makes it tough, really tough.
Well, we talked about it. Like, at what point does it not get to the point where it's like, all right, well, in this world, enough people would be pissed off and, like, they'd come for you in numbers,
right?
And, like,
But I have never seen a Star Wars table go more than 2 or 3 campaigns before wanting to play Sith. So, I mean, that is Star Wars.
I think what happens is just like the opposite of, like, being the good campaign is that you're sent after some evil guys, right? So they don't send everyone after you. They just send a heroic party after you, perhaps, or something, right? I mean, so I don't think it has to be overwhelmingly like everybody's coming after you, but they're going to send people after you at some point, right?
Yeah.
And it depends. I mean, what kind of, right, like Dan was saying, like, as long as you're not going around and, like, killing every person that you come across, then it's manageable.
Not punching every king in the dick.
And you can collect souls and that kind of thing as long as you're not killing everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. Like, you could do a very simple Session Zero, and it's like, okay, we're just running Mines of Phandelver there, and it's like, well, what if somebody starts going off the rails, killing townsfolk? I don't know. Like, how do you deal with that? It's like, let's go to the other town, and now I have to create an army to get them.
Like that campaign's not set up for it. Like, it's not even to handle selfish people. If they're just completely mercenary and they're like, we're not helping anybody unless there's, like, at least a gold coin on the table. Like, that campaign can still handle that, but it's the utter murder hobo aspect that you can't really, like, that campaign's just not set up to handle it.
So that's the one I'm running because it's supposed to be great. It's supposed to be easy to run for new DMs and stuff. And that was one thing I did tell. I don't know if you were there for that, Dan. Some of the players was like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to add some stuff to it, but, like, if you kill a guy who is going to give you that quest, then that quest is now gone. So, like, maybe don't kill everybody. Maybe just tread a little lightly in that regard.
Yeah, that's when a Session Zero becomes a mid-session thing where it's like, just so you guys know, like, actions have consequences, So, like, that's when you have to, like, reiterate what Session Zero discussed. Like, so I said you shouldn't be evil. We need to have a little conversation now and just kind of what you're doing is troublesome, not because I can't deal with it, but you're making choices.
Right.
Going back to the checklist thing you talked about, was everybody's feelings about where you want to, like basically bringing in taboo topics, or triggers. And in that case, do you think is a checklist good for that, or once again, do you want to go more free form? What are everybody's thoughts on that?
So I don't have if I start a group with you guys or someone else, I don't have a checklist to send anybody or anything like that. That's just not what I like to do. I would like to get everybody together and just talk about it in the social setting like we have right now and kind of feel everyone out. But I'd like to have a checklist for myself to bring up these different topics. So metagaming topic triggers, like you just said, is an important one. Because there are some things that certainly people, a heavy Strahd campaign with blood and gore and that type of thing, if you really lean into it, that's not for everybody for sure.
Right.
So I think it's important to have for the DM to go through some things. But as far as me, I don't utilize a checklist or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I think checklist is great, but it's just not me personally, And there's been success and failures with that approach. So take it as you will.
Oh, I think the two big ones are sex and racism, right? But I think the problem is history has all of that. So I know in my campaigns right out in the beginning, I will state this will tackle tough subjects. Now, am I going to rape somebody's character? No, that's not what's going to happen. Maybe that's in a character's past or something, but I'm not gonna touch that. There might be love interest, and I do have things like that in my campaign, but I definitely try and glaze over that a little bit and not make that take center stage. And I think players are typically respectful of that as well, to the fade to black type stuff. But racism is hard because we are dealing with different creatures that don't like each other. So I think that's so common when you look at it for not just the race, but their political cultures too. They have different feelings and interests, and they don't like each other. And I don't know. I feel like D&D is kind of kidding itself if it's not dealing with those type of cultures that deal with that. Honestly,
but to play devil's advocate on that, depending on, right now I see 4 white guys discussing this, and if you are working with a group or you're dealing with other groups, I don't want to get on my high horse and tell them what they should or should not deal with, especially if it's just supposed to be fun and this is their way to escape from and oftentimes distressing reality. I think they deserve to be heard on that subject, and you also, we never really know what's in, someone's past, what someone's bringing to the table, someone that, maybe they're a sexual assault survivor and that's not something they feel comfortable talking to anybody else about.
Of course.
But then one of the other players comes up and is talking very openly and loudly about, well, my half orc is a result of, an orc raping a human. And then this other player and you don't realize it's coming up, and they just start shutting down prematurely or even just leave the table. And you never even were aware that this was or could be a problem, versus, getting up ahead of this curve and just, asking people, and then maybe even saying back, you get say your questionnaire, if you do one, get your questionnaire back, and someone is like, this, sexual assault is a hard trigger for me, and then you don't even have to say who that is. You don't call attention. You just you just quietly tell everybody else in the group, hey, if you're doing a half elf or a half orc or something, don't make that part of your backstory. Instead, maybe it was you're the result of a human bandit that was taken in by an orc tribe, and so your half orc was raised by both parents, or it's that was not it's not every half orc or half elf is a result of a violent encounter.
Right.
Sure.
But
I think it's good to have in the questionnaire for sure. But also you don't have to tell me there will be these. That's what I write in mine. There will be certain things, But if there's something that you want to discuss, maybe not in a group setting or outside of it that you're not comfortable with, like you have to have that 2-lane communication of like, you are on a hero's journey. There are going to be tough things, but if there's topics that are taboo and you don't want to deal with, you need to be able to discuss that too in a way that says, oh, okay, I'm going to get rid of that then.
And I actually like a little bit of tension between the races. Personally, I think that makes sense, especially like some of these homebrew campaigns you play, and depending how you set it up. I know historically D&D has the orcs, and they're always with the lower intelligence, the evil, and this and that. But I think the tension between the races, I think that's just like, I think it makes sense. I mean, it's just honest truth of the matter, right? And whether in real life or in a fictional game, I think that's just how it would probably be, right? But I can understand if someone's uncomfortable with that. And so then, yeah, you can totally remove that if that's the case and say, you know what, we're not going to have that be a thing in this game, you know? So, but that's part of having that session zero and having that discussion, right?
I agree. Yeah.
And it obviates a problem that if it's going to be a problem, you figure it out early, and then everyone can kind of decide what they're comfortable with. If this is not the right table for you or them or something, but you don't get 6 session ends and then have a blow up.
Have any of you guys in your session zeros had anybody, whether it's like a trigger, something that might be triggering for them, where they bring it up and it's like big enough that it impacts some of the like ideas you had for your campaign or anything like that?
I haven't. I feel like it all sounds great until you get to weird situations in game that you didn't expect. And I mean, even if you look at some of these professional YouTubers, doing their things, like, I forget the guy's name, but sometimes things gets weird, and sometimes it's like just a train wreck. Like, why did it even have to go there? I think you can deal with things like kind of with a 10-foot pole for the most part and skirt around it, to just using simple game mechanics and not being a terrible person mechanic.
I bring part of the reason I bring this up is because last summer, my coworkers who knew I played D&D and several men never played before asked me to host kind of a one shot for them. Like, we've never played D&D before. We want to see what it's like. Will you host this for us? And because this is a professional environment, these are people I work with, not people I hang out with on the weekends and drink beer with.
This is a good point, yeah.
I absolutely went and got one of those questionnaires and sent it out. And I was like, I don't need to know details. Just let me know. And it was very exhaustive. And some of the things I got back, I won't say surprising, but it definitely made me step a little lighter on, like, part of the setup was this town being, invaded. And I really scaled down any just background descriptions of like the looting and the violence because like one of my coworkers is a mom, and it's like, I don't want, any violence towards children at all. I am uncomfortable with. I don't want any depictions of that. And it's like, okay, well, take out just the one throwaway descriptive line about orphans wailing in the background. Like, maybe just take that out, I didn't need that to run the session. And that was maybe the only thing that really hit me. But for instance, also, as they had to escape the city through the sewers, and they fought giant rats going through, because I was like, hey, introducing people to D&D, they have to fight giant rats. But if someone had sent back that they have like a really bad rat phobia, I'd have switched that for giant spiders, and we could have, and the session would not have been, suffered any for
and then
any
the
for
person
that.
with arachnophobia was like, I
yeah, I've actually
put that on the form.
So I've seen two different things, and one is actually arachnophobia. In the dragon campaign, one of the girls who started playing with us was like, that was one of her things. She's like, I just can't deal with giant spiders on the screen, right? She was like, that was a thing. So no big deal. The DM was like, no problem. One of the other ones I thought was interesting is one of the guys I played with, his parents died when he was young. And so he's like, I just don't want to get into someone's backstory about their parents died. And that's a common theme for people who create characters, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's so common.
It's an orphan.
So common. Exactly. And so I thought that was interesting. And it was just something that, everyone who made their character was like, yeah, no problem. I can, I'll have parents, bro. It was like, no problem at all. It was interesting because you just don't know. And, Yeah, so it's always, I think it's important to have the discussion and talk about these things, and like Mike said, get ahead of it before it becomes a thing and someone has a meltdown. It's a scene or something that's really unfortunate that takes place for someone.
I feel like, not to imply wrapping this up, but I feel like there's different session zeros for different groups for sure.
Yeah.
Like if you're familiar with them, if you're unfamiliar with them, if you have a working relationship, like you definitely, if you're unfamiliar or have some sort of working relationship, maybe you should do the questionnaire and have it a little more formal,
Right.
versus the people that you're used to throwing dice with, and you can more casually have conversations for sure.
I agree
Well,
100%.
Also, like Mike said, with a brand new group, I mean, if it's people who are completely new to the mechanics and everything, like I know I had pretty much almost 2 session zeros because most of the people in my group had never used Roll20. So like that alone was a session zero, having to like, how do you actually play? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point now. It's like, well, now that we're not playing during COVID, can we, play online? Are people cool with that? And some
Right.
people are and aren't, it's like,
Yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve. I think Roll20 does a pretty nice job, and there's other platforms out there that are out there that I think are okay as well. But Roll20 has been primarily the one I use, and a little bit of a learning curve. But ultimately, I feel like once you're a couple sessions in, you're pretty fluid with what's going out in the outlay of your character.
I mean, I don't know all the other different types, but I mean, your character sheet is basically a small database. So I think anywhere you go, there's some things that you're going to have to deal with on like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
With technology. So there's going to be a technology session zero anyway, because you have to import a character somehow.
So have you guys, and I ask you because I like most of my session zeros, I either joined campaigns that were already going, or it was with my in-person group and we all knew each other really well. So it was like very informal. Have you guys ever been a player at a session zero that took a weird turn or like had a weird vibe or something like that?
The session zero itself?
Yeah.
Most of my interactions have honestly been online at this point. And so it's been, between emails kind of thing. So no, or at least not that I know of.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't ever like left a group on a session zero and just been like, this isn't for me.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, but I have left groups like a couple sessions afterwards, and even though they had session zero, but it's just whether the session zero wasn't thorough enough, or again, just random people. Like I've definitely been part of groups where I just got very uncomfortable with the intra-player interactions. Where
typically that's the problem, right?
Yeah, I even thought the DM was fine. I played in a campaign where the DM was trying to run Curse of Strahd, and 2 of the players essentially constantly kept trying to steal from each other, and then got to the point of wanting to try and kill each other. And it's like it started out competitive from 2 players who definitely wanted to be the star of the room at all times to suck all the oxygen out of the room.
They didn't know they were playing a co-op.
Yeah, right.
Well, they did. They expected that they were Batman and everyone else was Robin, but then you had 2 Batmans, and they spent the first 3 sessions constantly trying to one up each other, and it started getting like It started to like turn in character violent between their characters, because the out of character players couldn't like come to any kind. I was just, I'm done. I'm out of here. This is not what
they didn't metagame. They kept it in game, but it still ruined the game, because then they started doing awful crap to each other. I've had that happen, and one of my buddies, this is a campaign from a while back, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm all done." And it's like, well, that sucks, because you were both good players.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's another thing. Like, I guess that's a good point, because, if you're a thief, some people think thieves just steal from your own crew, right? Like, I've seen it in the forums enough where it's like, somebody stole this from me. I was like, what do you do? That kind of PvP kind of aggression sucks.
Will not stand, man.
I was going to say, is that
I think that's a second zero topic.
I was just gonna say, is that something you guys kind of say like absolutely no PvP, or it depends on the situation?
Well, I think all right. So I think that the thief or a character who's like maybe a little bit sketchy on the side, looting some coins and trying not to sleight of hand them away and not share them with the group. I think that's totally fine if that's within what your character is. But I think actually stealing from another character while they're like sleeping or something, I think that should be off limits. And probably that should be a discussion. Most of the time I haven't had experience with that personally, so most of the time I think that's few and far between. But maybe not as much as I'd like to think.
I think this goes to a broader issue, and it's Vespa. You said this earlier, but in a different context. You talked about the context of metagaming and strategizing turns, but the idea of I'm going to do what my character's going to do. And to me, that's actually one of my biggest beefs in the broader world of role playing right now. Not in the metagame context, but in that thing of like people use it as an excuse to be an asshole, and I'm just they're like, well, it's what my character would do. Then make a character who's not an asshole. It's like always my response,
make a better character.
Make a better character.
That's a deeper problem than people doing. That's just like Dan said, RP shield, right? So that's a deeper problem. That's a problem with them, and that's not a problem with people role playing their character correctly. In my mind,
I agree.
That's a them problem,
Right. Oh no. I just was just interested because like we both use that same phrase, but in different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's the RP shield. It's the I'm doing what my character would do, and my response is always to make a character who's not an asshole. Like you don't have to be a shitty character. But again, I think that's a perfectly valid Session Zero topic. Like, I mean, to me, that's like I can DM for a group that wants to be like very mercenary and very just kind of like aloof and standoffish. Like there aren't really the heroes; they're more the anti-heroes. Like I can DM for a group like that, but don't just be complete dicks. Like, that's a rule for me. Like, I'm not going to enjoy campaigning for that table. If that's what you want, you need to find a different table. And there are DMs that will DM for that. It's just I'm not one of them. So.
Yeah, you can be cutthroat mercenaries, but don't be trying to cut each other's throat. Because it is a co-op game at heart, right?
Yeah, that's why I think sometimes it's just as important for the DM to have their one page saying this is the deal, as opposed to even taking player knowledge and interests. Because it's like for me, it's like I don't want to do split party stuff. I'll do it, but like that makes it, especially when you get 6 players. And if you're going to go off on a tangent for how long? I mean, that's exhausting, right? Like now I got, 2 people go off and now I got to, like 4 people are sitting there, So, I mean, that's not something that's one of those things where it's like, well, we don't intend to split up, but it happened, I
got another question for you guys. So it's some of either the Session Zeros you've done or been part of. As you were saying, some groups have a lot of people who want to be Batman. And it's like, I feel like in this campaigns I'm in with you guys, I think we do a pretty good job of trying to share the spotlight, and those who don't maybe speak up as much, like when they do, then like we are all like, no, you go. So I was just curious to like, you guys ever kind of address like at Session Zero, kind of like sharing the spotlight in a sense, like you're all main characters, or if you feel like it's even needed to bring that up.
It's a good idea. I think I have failed to do that in the past, but I will try and reinforce it over the course of the campaign.
In the game,
I've received positive reviews for having done it, but I haven't explicitly addressed it in Session Zero. But I don't see any reason why you couldn't, and it's probably a good idea. And especially like again, setting overall expectations, both like as a DM and also to the players. Like, hey guys, like I will give all of you your chance in the sun. Try not to step on each other's moments. If someone's clearly having a moment, like don't just shove them aside and try to grab the spotlight.
I haven't had that discussion in game in Session Zero before either, but I think that comes down to continual conversation though, because there's players who I just think are miserable sometimes, and then you talk to them and they're like, nah, man, this is good. I love it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I just, you didn't say much last session, but they're just like absorbing it, And so it's kind of like an analytical mind sometimes. And I don't know, it's sort of for the DM to feel out a little bit and be like, of course, like, all right, well, they're all doing this. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, directly ask them.
Yeah.
But I don't. That's a hard thing. That's like an in-game thing to do, and it's hard to like deal with that prior to sessions happening, unless it's like
Right.
afterward. But that's not a session zero. I haven't had to do that.
Yeah, so this was like in one specific campaign I was in, like maybe, I don't know, 8 sessions in or something. The DM's like, hey, one of the guys said that like he thinks you're doing too much or whatever. And I was like, well, I just felt like nobody else was doing anything. So I was just trying to move things
that.
forward, and I was like, oh no, I totally get that. Like, and so then sometimes like, and it's still like the next 2 sessions or so, I was trying to be a little bit quieter and everything. And then we would just be like, there'd be like silence for a while, but I was like, well, I can't say anything. I'm like, cannot say anything. Like, do not say anything.
So you're at the bar, you're at the tavern.
Do not say anything. So then I'm just sitting there. We sit there for silence, like for a minute. And I'm like, someone's got to say something eventually. But I'm like, it's not going to be me, And eventually, honestly, those other players, and maybe they were newer to the game, I don't know. But then they got better at actually, like, kind of feeling that vibe and like speaking up and doing things and whatever. And I think we got more harmonious because of it. So I think there's some value there if someone has a complaint about someone or just thinks that, like, hey, they're taking over more of the spotlight, right? Because I just thought I was doing what was right, but maybe they just didn't feel that their opportunity was there. So.
Yeah, I think, like as D&D is getting more into like schools, there's a certain amount of bravery that is on the player that needs to happen sometimes too, because the DM can't really preemptively attack all bad things, like and the players need to chime in and explore, and if maybe they're new or maybe they think D&D is weird or whatever, I don't know, but you have to get comfortable, or maybe it's the rule sets that are just confusing. I've seen a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'm going to go do this, let's go be weird, and they're like all in, but they don't know how the rules work, so they're just slower at it because they don't know what to do, So I guess you got to take that into consideration, but you can't preempt that kind of those.
Yeah, you don't know that that's going to happen until you've gotten there or past that point, right?
Right.
But I think a session zero does help in that regard of like by establishing that you are trying to address these concerns. They'll your players will be more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt when problems do come up, and or approach you, with something that you didn't anticipate, because you've already shown some willingness to work with them and take input. I think honestly, it's kind of like just putting your best foot forward in that regard.
Yeah. So we're at we've almost done this an hour here, so let's kind of go around the boxes here and kind of, what are some of your takeaways from the discussion here, or any final alibis that you might have. Anyone want to start?
I think one question I had coming into here is like, why wouldn't you do a session zero? And then like, I feel like I couldn't think of a good reason. And then especially after talking about it more, I feel like, I don't know, unless there's scheduling issues, it's like, I feel like it's always a good idea just to kind of have everybody have an understanding of what they can expect and stuff. So,
well, I have one idea about one way a session zero could backfire.
Okay.
And this is more playing devil's advocate, or maybe it's a different concern, but essentially, a lot of players, most campaigns I've played in, like to kind of like strategize, like, okay, well, where are you playing? Where are you playing? And someone's like, well, I'll play whatever, so we don't have, or and people start kind of asking, basically kind of figuring out what are the roles, what are the niches? Like, do we have a healer? No one's playing a healer. I'll play a healer. But what if the last 3 campaigns you've played in, you've been the healer, and now you're kind of getting tired of it? Do you feel, I guess, do you get pressured into it? Like, you get pigeonholed that way? Do you end up playing a character that you think you would enjoy, but you end up, maybe you're trying a new play style and you just don't like it?
That is something that happens in a session zero among players. I think as a DM, I don't think you need that, right? Like, especially 5th edition, you can do your rest system based on that, healing potions, and I mean, half the classes have some sort of healing thing anyway. But you're right. That's actually a thing that happens with players. Like, who's playing what? What's your niche? What are you doing? You know, you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, do you stop that or do you let it go? I mean, I've always let it go because if someone wants their, stealth niche, like, okay, go for it. You know.
I think that's good to let it go because I mean I think everybody wants to be playing something. If you have 3 rogues, then you don't get that spotlight that we were just talking about, right? Because everyone's chasing the same spotlight, right? That's really challenging. Then at the same time, I don't think you need a healer in 5e at all. I played campaigns and there was no healer at all, and everybody had a little level of healing, maybe like paladin, but no cleric, so. Up to level 12, I think I had a party that there was no healer, and we didn't need it, and I don't think it's necessary in 5e. So I think as long as you make it clear that, like, hey, you don't have to fill one of these roles, as long as everybody has their, whatever they're interested in doing, and there's not like I said, 3 rogues, because then everybody's going to be chasing that same spotlight moment to break in somewhere or do some stealth thing, right? Or maybe they can work as a team. Who knows? I mean, maybe you got a team of rogues doing all their stealth stuff together, and that works out.
I was just gonna say you got like an attack squad in the dark.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be.
I mean, that could be cool too. So
Hey, you're running a special forces campaign. Great.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think Session Zero is great. I personally just do it more informal, and most of the time I've had good results with that, especially with knowing the people that I'm going to be playing with already previously. Right.
After discussing it tonight, if your group at work or people on your road or something wanted to be like, hey, let's play a game, would you do a more formal one because of that, or would you keep it informal?
Yeah, so certainly I guess if it were people I worked with that I wanted to bring into it, I mean, they're all pretty relaxed and everything anyway, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. They like booze and bourbon, and so I can tie that in pretty easily, right? I got a quest for this guy who makes Budweiser or something, whatever. But I don't know. I kind of like just getting together and talking it out and seeing where everybody is at. And then, maybe if I certainly like have a checklist. Like I like to go over like triggers, metagaming, that type of stuff. But I don't think a checklist is just like where I'm at,
Yeah.
Like for the players,
I definitely like to do it because I like to have it there.
Yeah, it's good reference for the background info and stuff like that. But I think I think just getting together and discussing that, and then you can get back to me with your feedback that's personal to you, as far as if you have those type of triggers or things like that you don't want to see happen. And then I'll take those into account. I'll keep those on one big notepad and say, okay, I'm not going to do this, this, and this, but I'm going to do this, this, and this, right? But I'm lazy too, so then maybe that's part of it.
I know. I'm like a formal Vespa. I don't know. Those 2 words don't.
That's just not me.
Yeah. I'm probably the classic overplanner then. My wife might not agree with that comment, but
yeah, I do enough of that at work, right? I'm all about the planning, and that's what I do for a living. So.
I'm really relaxed at home, but when it comes to D&D,
right,
I'm on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, I make sure that everything's covered.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think there's a lot of value in doing the Session Zero, however you want to do it, right?
Yeah. Anything else, gentlemen? Well, let's wrap this up. So hopefully everyone has found something to take away from the spirited discussion here. I know I definitely think differently about it, but it definitely reinforced some ideas for myself. So please hit the subscribe button, and we'll come out with another one sometime soon, hopefully by the end of the month here. And until then, keep rolling. Thanks.
What a sign off. You've been working on
I
that.
know.
Keep rolling.
Keep rolling.
Spent months thinking that one up.